In 2021, scientists in Denmark unearthed some ancient DNA from human remains at a cemetery dating back to the Black Death outbreak in the Middle Ages. It was a fascinating discovery that could help understand how one of humanity's most devastating plagues ever started. However, it looks like they may have uncovered more than they bargained for. After analyzing the remains of 2 men who died during the plague, scientists found out that only one of them had the plague, which has led to even more questions about where the disease originated. But what exactly is the plague? And why should you care about it? Yersinia, Pestis, or the plague disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. This bacteria typically affects rodents, but can be transmitted to humans through the bite of an infected flea. The plague first appeared in China around 3000 BC and has continued to reappear throughout history. One of the deadliest outbreaks occurred in Europe during the Middle Ages, killing an estimated 75 to 200 million people, known as the Black Death. This plague is believed to have arrived in Europe from Asia through trading ships, quickly spreading across the continent. Symptoms included fever, weakness, aches, pains, buboes or swollen lymph nodes, bleeding, and blackening of the skin. Death usually occurred within a week after the onset of symptoms. While the plague still exists today, it's much less common than it once was. According to the World Health Organization, today we're on 2,000 cases reported worldwide in 2021. Most of these cases occurred in rural areas of Africa, where the disease is often spread by rodents. There are 3 main forms of the plague: bubonic, septicemic, and pneumonic. Bubonic plague is the most common form and is caused by bacteria that infect the lymph node. Septicemic plague occurs when the bacteria entered the bloodstream. A pneumonic plague happens when the lungs become infected. All 3 forms can cause the same symptoms, including fever, weakness, aches, and pains and bleeding. But the different forms can also lead to different outcomes. For example, pneumonic plague is particularly dangerous because it can be spread through the air. Despite the fact that the plague is still around today, we know relatively little about its origin. We don't know where it came from or how it started spreading around the world. But thanks to recent advances in technology, scientists may finally be able to piece together the puzzle of the plague's past. Researchers from the University of Copenhagen used ancient DNA to analyze the remains of 2 men who died during the Black Death outbreak. They hoped to find out if the plague had mutated since it first appeared in China. What they didn't expect to find was a mystery that would only deepen our understanding of the disease. The first man they analyzed was buried in a church in the Danish town of Othe. He was only 25 years old when he died in 1349. The second man they analyzed was a bit of a mystery. He was found in a mass grave outside the church. It's not clear who he was or how he died. But based on the location of his body, it's likely that he was killed by the plague. After analyzing the remains of both men, researchers found something shocking. Only one of them had the plague. So what does this mean? If the plague had mutated, it would explain why only one of the men tested positive for the disease. However, further analysis showed that this wasn't the case. The bacteria found in the remains was identical to the strain of Yersinia, Pestis, deadliest, found in Africa today. So if the plague had indeed mutated, and the bacteria was the same strain that S found in Africa, then why did only one of the men test positive? The answer, scientists believe, lies in the way the plague is transmitted. When the plague first appeared in Europe, it's thought that it was carried by rats. These rats were probably infected by fleas that had fed on infected rodents in Asia. As the rats spread the disease across Europe, they infected humans through their bites. This is known as bubonic plague because the bacteria infect the lymph nodes and cause them to swell. However, there are other ways that the plague can be spread. The bacteria can also enter the bloodstream and cause septicemic plague, or it can infect the lungs and cause pneumonic plague. And this is where things get interesting. Scientists believe that pneumonic plague may have played a role in the death of the unidentified man buried in the mass grave. This form of the plague is much more rare and is spread through the air. It occurs when the bacteria infect the lungs and then spread to other parts of the body. Symptoms of pneumonic plague include fever, weakness, aches, pains, difficulty breathing, and coughing up blood. The bacteria can then be spread to others through the air or through contact with infected bodily fluid. Pneumonic plague is particularly dangerous because it can be spread through the air. This means that people can contract the disease without ever being bitten by a rat or flea. It also means that the disease can spread very quickly through large populations. If this is how the unidentified man was infected, it could explain why he was buried in a mass grave. During the Black Death outbreak, the entire families were sometimes killed by the plague. Mass graves were often used to bury the dead because they were too numerous to be buried individually. This man may have been too sick to be moved to the church for a proper burial, so he was simply buried in the mass grave. It's possible that the man buried in the church did not have the plague. This could explain why he was given a proper burial. After all, during the Black Death outbreak, it was common for people to be buried in churches if they could afford it. What does this mean for our understanding of the plague? Scientists still don't know where the plague originated or how it started spreading around the world. But this discovery does tell us that pneumonic plague may have played a role in the death of at least one man during the Black Death outbreak. It also tells us that the plague may have been more widespread than we previously thought. If pneumonic plague was spreading through the air, then it's possible that many more people were infected with the disease than we realize. This is just one small piece of the puzzle. But as scientists continue to uncover more about the plague's past, we may be able to better understand and control this deadly disease. The plague has been around for thousands of years, and yet we still know relatively little about it. The recent discovery that only one of the two men buried in the church had the plague has deepened our mystery surrounding the disease. But as scientists continue to study the remains and search for answers, they may just be able to solve one of history's oldest medical mysteries. And as they piece together the puzzle of the plague's past, they may also be able to develop new ways to prevent and treat this deadly disease. The plague may have been around for centuries, but it doesn't have to be a death sentence. With more research and understanding, we may be able to protect ourselves from this deadly disease for centuries to come. As we continue to learn more about the plague, it's important to remember that it's not just a historical curiosity. The disease is still around today, and we need to do everything we can to understand and control it. From developing new treatments to raising awareness of the disease, there is a lot that we can do to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe from the plague. So what can you do to protect yourself from the plague? The good news is that there are a few simple things you can do to reduce your risk of contracting the disease. First, avoid contact with rodents and fleas. This may be easier said than done, especially if you live in a rural area where rodents are common. But it's important to take precautions if you do come into contact with rodents. Be sure to wash your hands thoroughly and inspect yourself for ticks. You should also take steps to prevent fleas from entering your home. If you have pets, be sure to keep them indoors and away from wild animals. You should also vacuum frequently, wash your bedding in hot water. If you do get bitten by a flea, be sure to seek medical attention right away. Early treatment can help prevent the disease from spreading. Finally, be sure to stay up to date on your vaccinations. There is a vaccine available for the plague, but it's not required by law. However, it is a good idea to get the vaccine if you travel to areas where the plague is common. Now, did you find this video informative or helpful? Let us know in the comments section below. Make sure to stay tuned for more content. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.